called Jeff for his birthday.
Good evening, Rabotai. We're going to talk tonight about something very important, something very useful and crucial to us as Jews, which is that, the methodology that a person should be using as a Jew, as a rabbi, to paskin halacha, to formulate the halacha. How do you make the halacha? In order to explain this, there's a lot of things that a person has to understand. First of all, right, the Chazal teach us a basic fundamental principle, which is that the halacha is made by the rabbis. It's not made by God. In other words, once the Torah was given on Har Sinai, now the Torah is in the hands of the rabbis. It's not in the hands of God anymore. So what does that mean? God tells the rabbis, you must paskin halacha, you must say the halacha to the people. So the rabbis have an obligation to formulate the halacha and tell people what's the halacha in every generation. This is their job of the rabbis. It's not the job of God now to come and to tell you, oh yeah, do like this, do like that. Once the Torah was given, now it's in the hands of the rabbis. There's a famous midrash that, bears out this point. You know what it says, right, in the midrash? It says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah to Am Yisrael, so the Satan, wanted to accuse, whatever, he was looking for make some problems. So what he did was, he came to the earth, and he was asking people, where's the Torah? I heard that the Torah came down to the earth, because before it was in the heavens. You know what I mean? So they told him, they said, it's by Moshe Rabbeinu. Go and find it by him. So he went and he found it, and the Torah was by him. So, Lo Bashamayim, they say in Chazal, in the Talmud. What does that mean? It's not in the heavens. We don't ask anymore the halakha from heavens, to come down, some angels, and tell us what's the halakha. The rabbis have to paskin halakha. This is our job as rabbis. To paskin halakha, a person who's gotten to that level, obviously, that, he can do that. Why do I tell you this? Because there was I publicized a post a couple of days ago, and what happened was that this post became like a sort of an item, right, a little bit controversial. And I'll tell you the story, right, how this occurred. What happened was that a person came to me, somebody in our community, and he asked me a very interesting question. At first it struck me like something which is not allowed to do, and then I realized, that there is actually a way to permit this. What he asked me is like this. He says, Rosh Hashanah, he says, I have a child. This guy's divorced, so he has a child from his first wife, and then he has children also from his second wife as well. So what he wants to do is he wants to pick up the child from his first wife on Rosh Hashanah, because he couldn't pick him up before that, because they have joint custody. You know how it is, right? You got to go here, you got to go there. So what happens is that he can only pick him up on Rosh Hashanah. That's what the court said. So this lady won't let them come earlier than that. So what does that mean? He has to go pick them up, but they live far away. They live in Flushing. It will be like to walk over there will be like more than an hour. Very difficult with little children, to walk that long. So the question was like this. He asked me a very honest question. His question was, can I take a cab, and on Rosh Hashanah, which is the Kaidre, Yom Tov, and pick up my child and bring him to my place where I can take him to the synagogue together with my children. So right away when he asked me this question, my initial response was, no, you're not allowed to do that. Right? And the reason is because driving a car on Shabbat, there's a fire there in the engine. So since there's a fire in the engine, this is like one of the forbidden labors, right, on Shabbat. But then I said to myself, wait a second, just reminded me, right? The truth is that on Yom Tov it's not the same thing as Shabbat. What does that mean? That Shabbat, lighting a fire is considered to be one of the 39 forbidden labors on Shabbat. Lighting a fire. Whether it's a cigarette or a match or, lighting your engine, combustion engine, or whatever. Not a Tesla. That's something else, right? That's a different story. So you're lighting a combustion engine. This is also a fire. There's a fire in there. So all these types of fires are forbidden on Shabbat to light. Strictly forbidden according to the Torah. So, but the truth is on Yom Tov it's not so. What does that mean? According to Torah, on Yom Tov you're allowed to light a fire. On Yom Tov. What does that mean? You're allowed to cook with a fire. You can transfer the fire from one place to another. But what happened was that the sages came at a certain time, and they said, what? Even though on Yom Tov you're allowed to light a fire according to Torah, because you're allowed to cook and so forth and so on, but don't light a new fire. Just take an existing flame and take it from there and move it over to somewhere else. So you can take an existing flame and move it to somewhere else, This is what the sages said. But to light a new fire on Yom Tov, they forbade. Even though according to the Torah, it's allowed to do that. This is the way it is, right? So what does that mean? That says that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, which is the commentary on the Mishnah and Masechet Betzah, 4:7 over there, 4:7, chapter 4, Mishnah 7. It says over there that lighting a fire on Yom Tov, it looks like a labor. What does that mean? It's not really a labor, right? But it looks like one. Therefore, the sages forbade because it looks like it. So therefore, you see from there that the whole thing about lighting a flame on Yom Tov, even a new flame, is only a rabbinical prohibition. And many other poskim bring this down. In the Halacha, MARAN Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, he also brings this down in the laws of Yom Tov in Chazon Ovadia, his book over there. He writes over there on page Nun Gimel on 53. He says over there that this prohibition to light a flame, a new flame on Yom Tov, is only rabbinical prohibition. That's the way it is. So then, I said to myself, oh, okay, now it's only rabbinical. So what does that mean? That now there's a rule like this, right? In the Shulchan Aruch, we have a rule in the laws of Shabbat that you're allowed to tell a goy to do something which is only a rabbinical prohibition if it's for the sake of a mitzvah. That's one of the examples that it's allowed to do. Or also, it could be for other reasons as well. But for the sake of a mitzvah, you're allowed to do. So going to synagogue on a holiday is definitely a mitzvah, or any day. Going to synagogue is always a mitzvah. As it says in the laws of prayers, it says that it's a mitzvah to go to synagogue. And especially when you have a shofar, which is also a bigger mitzvah. So these things are both mitzvot. So therefore, what I said to myself was like this. Since the Halacha says, Shulchan Aruch, and the laws of Shabbat, it says over there that you're allowed to tell a goy to go and deduce a rabbinical prohibition. So therefore, now I plug it in. So what's the plug? The plug is that, as we said, driving a car on Yom Tov involves kaid chazeh, It involves the prohibition, it's a rabbinical prohibition of lighting a fire. This is the prohibition. It's only rabbinical on Yom Tov, as we said. So therefore, since you're telling a goy to do it, the driver is a goy, right? So therefore, you're allowed to tell the goy to drive you to synagogue. This is the idea, So this is the reason why I told this person who really needed this permission, because he wanted to have his son with him on Rosh Hashanah. Otherwise, it would have been very, very difficult for him to have a son. And, it's sentimental, you want to have your son with you on the holiday. It's considered to be a very big thing. So, therefore, I went out of my way, to tell this person, you're allowed to do it because, as I said, right, that it's allowed. Because you're telling a goy to do a rabbinic prohibition. That you're allowed to do. You cannot tell a goy to do a prohibition from the Torah on Shabbat or Yom Tov. But if it's a rabbinic prohibition, you're allowed to tell him. It's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, explicitly in the Rambam and the Rif. It's brought down also in the books of MARAN Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. He also writes in his book Chazon Ovadia, Shabbat, volume 3. He says over there in page 443 that you're allowed to do something like that, to tell a goy to do something which is rabbinically prohibited. So therefore, this is the reason why I told him that he's allowed to do it. And he was very happy. He thanked me. He blessed me. And he until this day he appreciates what I did for him. Okay, so fine, that's great. So I'm very happy. He's happy. I'm happy. So what happened was I decided to write this up also to post it, on the social media, because I want other people to know this, this leniency, that there is such a thing like that. Because also, what happens is that people have sometimes on Rosh Hashanah, people who are, elderly, aged people, they have a hard time getting to shul, So therefore I said was that if he needs to get to shul, a person who can't walk to shul, very hard for him to do so, too old or whatever, or it's very, very, very far, whatever it is, something like that. So shvut b'makom mitzvah. What does that mean? It's two rabbinical prohibitions. One is telling a goy is rabbinical, and also to light the fire is rabbinical. So since it's two rabbinical prohibitions and it's a mitzvah, you're allowed to do. That's what I said, right? So I wrote it down. I posted it, and people got like very, very, very fidgety with this. They got very nervous when I wrote this. They said, "Oh, this rabbi is coming to, to break the Torah." But the truth is, that's all within the confines of Halacha. This thing, very much within the confines of Halacha. There's no issues. There's no problems with that. So, why do I tell you this story? Because the rule is, that I want to tell you it was a tradition. My rabbi, MARAN Ovadia, he used to tell us, he trained us to paskin halacha, to formulate the halacha. This is what we learned by him, I sat by him for 15 years, listening to his lectures, praying with him, and being in his house, being in his yeshiva, being in the synagogue. So we got a tradition from him, we got a masoret. We have a tradition. Not like we just make things up from the sky. So the rabbi used to tell us, when we used to go over there, he used to invite us to his house. And we used to sit there. And he would give us a lecture, a special lecture for the students over there. So he would tell us like this, in this generation, he would say, right, that you have to be as lenient as possible in the community. Don't be stringent with them. Don't tell them everything is forbidden, everything is asur. He used to always tell us, koach de etera adif. What does that mean? That the strength of the leniency is much better than the strength of the stringency. You have to try to be lenient as much as possible. This is what he told us. So he inculcated us into us, this philosophy, which was his own philosophy. His approach was like that. That always tried to be. So he told us like this explicitly. He said, "Be as lenient as possible as the halacha allows. As far as you can go. Go to the extreme of the halacha to be lenient with them, as long as it's within the confines of halacha." This is what he told us. So we got this, and he told us, don't think that this is like the older generations, the Ben Ish Chai, what it was 100 years ago, where people were very stringent, everybody was machmir. He says, in our generation, people can't stand stringencies. It's too hard for them. They can't take it. It's too heavy on them. This is the way the generation is. So the MARAN, my rabbi, he knew this very well. He understood very well. So he instructed us very, very clearly that you have to be as lenient as possible according to halacha. Go as far as you can. But don't, you can't get too lost with that also. What does that mean? To go out of the confines of halacha. That you cannot do. Matir asurim, permit everything which is forbidden. That you cannot do. But if you can find a way to permit it, so what does that mean? The truth is that, according to this philosophy, by the way, his philosophy was not his own creation. This was something which is documented in the words of Chazal, in the words of the sages. And I'll explain to you where that comes from.
Yeah, you taught me that.
Yeah, right. So what he told us is like this, right? He said that you have to be as lenient as possible, and this must be done this way. And he used to tell us like this: whoever doesn't do this way, he's not my student. He doesn't go in my ways. And this is just comes in stark opposition to the approach of many Ashkenazi communities, which are go stringent, very stringent sometimes. Like the Chazon Ish, Bnei Brak. They're very stringent. So the rabbi was against this approach.
Either they're stringent or they're Chuck Schumers.
Right, very extreme, right? Yeah. So the rabbi was against this approach, and it wasn't his personal, approach. It was something which is in the Chazal, in the words of the sages. So I'll explain to you how, where we find this in the words of the sages. First, I want to tell you, right before I get to the sources, that because of this issue, that a person has to be lenient as possible, according to this approach, that means that a rabbi, when he gets a question, he always has to, go the extra mile, that makes that extra effort. Roll up your sleeves, and try to find something. Open up the books. What are you a rabbi for? Just to make money, to get money from people? You have to give them leniencies, because they need to live practically. So what does that mean? That when a person gets a question, a rabbi gets a question, he has to open up the books and see if he can find something. He has to try to use his mind to formulate the leniency somehow. This is an obligation on the rabbi to do such a thing like that. It's not just something recommended. No, you have to try. I'll give you an example, right? And you'll understand. There's a story like this, a true story. They say that one of the great rabbis also was a friend of the MARAN, Rabbi Ovadia. He was a friend of his. His name was Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was also a great rabbi. And one time a lady came to him, and she told the rabbi, she said, "Oh, says Rabbi, I want to tell you something, Unfortunately, I can't get married to a Jewish guy because I went to the Rabbanut, in Israel over there, the Rabbanut, and they told me that I'm a mamzeret, I'm an illegitimate child because, there was some adultery there, something, whatever, right? And because of that, I'm not legitimate, so I can't marry a Jewish boy. So only somebody who's not legitimate."
Yeah.
So what happened was that Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he says, "Okay, let me see your file. Let me show me what they have on you, right? And I'll try to give you some way to permit this, to get you in. Some kind of loophole, That's what he was saying. So what happened was that he stood up that night, all night. He didn't sleep that night, the rabbi, He was a great man. He was a big tzaddik. All night he stayed up, and until he found this lady a way to get into the community, some kind of permission, some kind of leniency. He didn't sleep. He stayed up all night. So in the morning, he found something. Until the morning he found it. He found her a leniency to get in, to be able to marry. And he called her up in the morning. And she says, I'm happy to inform you that I have a way for you to get in to the community. I found a leniency for you. So, they asked him the question, afterwards, after this whole thing occurred, they asked the rabbi, they said, Rabbi, why were you so anxious to get her a leniency? Go to sleep and, do it tomorrow. Stayed up all night. Isn't that very extreme? A person is supposed to sleep at night, no? So, he told him, he says, how can I sleep at night when I know somebody's suffering like this, excommunicated from the community, ostracized from the community? I couldn't sleep like that. He says, until I found her a solution. How can I sleep at night when I know somebody's suffering like that? They don't have a leniency like that to rely on. So you see from here, right, that a very good example of this concept, that the rabbi, has to work to find leniencies. Don't just tell people everything asur, 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 asur. This is forbidden, this is forbidden, this is forbidden. This is not the way of the halacha. This is not the way of the tradition that we have. To just tell everybody everything is asur. Especially the Sephardic tradition. I'll explain to you why that is, right? The Sephardic is different from the Ashkenazi. So let's go down a little bit to the sources, right? So there's a Gemara in Masechet Betzach. It's over there in Bet Amud Bet. And also this Gemara recurs, by the way, in many places. Same thing is written in Masechet Brachot, Eruvin, Bava Metzia, right? Moed Katan, Chagiga, many places in the Gemara. It says Koach De'eter Adif. What does that mean? That the strength of leniency is better. Is preferred. The strength of leniency is preferred. What is the Gemara talking about? The Gemara is talking about over there. There's talking about all kinds of discussions in Halacha. So Gemara says, right, that ask a question over there. Why, because the Gemara was talking about the leniency, how far this rabbi is lenient. Discusses how far he's willing to go to be lenient. So the Gemara asks, why aren't you discussing how far the other rabbi is willing to go stringent? Because there was a dispute between them. So the Gemara answers, Koach de'eter adif. What does that mean? It's better to go to the lenient side. It's better to show the lenient side. So Rashi explains over there, what does that mean? It says Rashi, what it means is that when the rabbi goes to the lenient side, he exposes a leniency, he's sure about that. And that's why he says that it's allowed. He's sure, So therefore we learn from there how far you can go, how lenient you can be. And this is considered to be very much more important than learning the other side, how stringent the other rabbi wants to be. You know why? Because that rabbi, the reason why he wants to be stringent is because he has a doubt. He's not sure if this is allowed. So your doubt, what do I care about your doubts? This guy is sure, he's sure that it's lenient. Mm-hmm. And you're coming and bringing your doubts. Oh, I'm not sure, if you're not sure, that doesn't really teach us much. You know what I mean? So therefore, koach de'eter adif. It's better to reveal the lenient side than to reveal the stringent side. So the Gemara talks about this issue. The rabbi used to quote this all the time. He used to tell us, you see from there that you have to try to go to the lenient side. This is preferred. Try to be lenient on the people. Don't be stringent with them. This is preferred. If you can find something, which is legitimate, something which is kosher. This is the idea. So this is the way we were trained, and also the Zohar Kadosh, the truth is, right, explains this on a deeper level, which is something really very fascinating. The Zohar Kadosh says something else. Yeah, koach de'eter adif. There was two schools of thought in Halacha, as there will start to be machloket, disputes in Halacha, in the Talmud. There was Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. Very famous, two schools of thought, very well known. So what was the difference? In general, right, Bet Hillel was more lenient, and Bet Shammai was more stringent, right? So came out, right, in the end, they made the Halacha like Bet Hillel, to be lenient. Halacha is always like Bet Hillel, except a couple of cases. Otherwise, always like Bet Hillel. Not only that, right? They said something even more severe. That if you say to people Halacha is like Bet Shammai, you're liable to death on that. Can you imagine? He's liable to death for telling people to be stringent like Bet Shammai. You're not allowed to say that. So comes the Zohar Kadosh and explains this, more in depth. What does this mean? So it says the Zohar Kadosh Baruch Hu, God created the world with two qualities. When He started the whole world, right, in the beginning, Bereshit, in the beginning, he had quality of din, justice, and then quality of chesed, kindness. Two qualities, right? So it says the Kadosh, which one is better? Right? Which one is preferred to Hashem, to God? Kindness is preferred more than justice. Even though you need both qualities in the world cannot exist without justice, it cannot exist without kindness. So it says the Kadosh, the kindness is the preferred quality of Kadosh Baruch Hu. Not justice. Why is that? Because kindness allows people to live, like gives them practically, the power just to exist. Because if it was just strict justice, nobody could bear that. It would be too strict. Everybody would have to die, God forbid. So, therefore, Kadosh Baruch Hu likes the leniency. He likes the kindness more than the justice. So says the Kadosh. What do you see from there? You see from there that if there's machloket, if there's a dispute between two rabbis, right? Bet Hillel, Bet Shammai, right? Something like that. Just like they said in the Gemara that the halacha is like Bet Hillel because they're lenient, right? And we want the leniency that's better for us. So says the Zohar Kadosh, in every generation it has to be like that. That the lenient side has to win out in halacha. You know what I mean? There's always a stringent side, there's always a lenient side. There's always arguments between the rabbis. The lenient side has to win out. Because we have to make this world livable. Otherwise it's not livable. We get into a situation where the world becomes very cruel. We can't fathom it. We can't tolerate it like that. So it says the Kadosh, it's a mitzvah to always make the halacha like the lenient side, and not like the stringent side. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu prefers kindness to justice. That's what the Zohar Kadosh says. So this is a deeper understanding of what it really means, that what the rabbi was telling us is actually a very deep concept. He was telling us, be as lenient as possible on the people, because this is the way to make the life livable. Otherwise, it becomes unlivable, the life. It becomes too cruel, too nasty. You can't live like that. For most people, some people can tolerate. Most people cannot, because they're not on that level. So now we begin to understand, right, that this concept of being lenient is really something which is very well rooted in the words of the sages. It has to be that way. So that's exactly right what the rabbi taught us, and that's exactly what I do until this day, by the way. When somebody comes and asks me a question, always trying to find a leniency for him. Don't just say, it's very easy to just tell people, cross your legs, sit there like a, Mr. Aristocrat, aristocratic rabbi, drive your luxury Lexus car, and have a fancy office, and tell people, yeah, it's asur, don't do that, everything is asur, everything is forbidden. Why are you telling them everything is forbidden? Try to find the leniency for them. Try to find the permission for them. That's your job as a rabbi. If you don't do that, you failed your job. This is what the rabbi taught us. This was our tradition. So now, right, people will understand a little bit better, why I go out of my way to give leniency to people. It has to be done the right way. What does that mean? It has to be done the right way, right? There's a couple of things that a person has to know. In order that a person should get to the level of formulating the halacha, he has to be trained for that, right? What does that mean? He went to a yeshiva, he went to a kollel. Over there was a rabbi who knew how to train you on that. You got trained, got ordained, got a license, right? Got a asmacha. Once you got that, okay, you're already, pretty good. You're doing pretty good. But more than that, you have to have experience. You have to learn for a long time, many, many years. There are some people, unfortunately, they come, they're in the yeshiva for like 2, 3 years or 5 years. They think they're already a big shot rabbi. 5 years after you came into yeshiva, you're a big shot rabbi now? You're nothing, you're zero. What are you? Until you learn for like 20, 30 years, The biggest rabbis have been learning for 50 years, 60 years. Those are the leading rabbis. You know what I mean? They've been studying all their life like that. So what does that mean? That a person cannot say that, if they understand. When you come in as a newcomer, so therefore says the Ramah, the Shulchan Aruch, brings from the Rambam, quotes from the Rambam's thing, right? That the young students who come in, and tell people, and tell them what's the halacha, and they're making mistakes because they don't know yet. They're not old enough yet. And also this applies, by the way, to a Baal Tshuva. What does that mean? Somebody who became religious recently, 5 years ago became a Baal Tshuva, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and now all of a sudden thinks he's a big shot rabbi. You're only in 6th grade, you're a 6th grader, like what do you think you are? You just got your feet wet in Torah, and you think you're already a big shot rabbi? You're telling people everything is asur. Yeah, don't do that, don't do this. Who are you to tell people like that? If the person has to understand. So therefore, the Gemara says, Masechet Avodah Zarah, and it's also brought down in the Ramah as well, and the Beit Yosef, Siman Reish Mem Gimel, Reish Mem Bet, in the Shulchan Aruch. It says over there that a person is not allowed to formulate the halacha until he reaches the age of 40. Why is that? What's the reason why the age of 40 is considered to be so important? So actually there's a chumash about this, there's a Torah, So it says over here in Parshat Kitavo, right, something very interesting about that. I'll show you what it says. It says, "V'lo natan Adonai lachem lev ladat einayim lirot ve'oznaim lishmoa ad yom hazeh." So Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't give you understanding heart until this day. What does that mean? Until the last day they were in the desert. How long were they in the desert? For 40 years. So in the next pasuk it says like this. The next verse says, "Va'olech etchem 40 shana b'midbar." V'lo barusim. 40 years you were in the desert. God guided you in the desert for 40 years. So says the Rashi over here, he learns from here, the Chazal, the sages, they say, you see from here that a person doesn't understand what his rabbi teaches him for 40 years. It could take him 40 years to understand what his rabbi said. So therefore, they learn from here, this 40 years, right? 40 days and 40 nights, right? 40 years, comes in Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, and says, you see from here, the Gemara also, Masechet Avodah Zarah, the Ramah takes from there, that a person is not allowed to formulate the halacha until he's 40 years old. Because once he's 40 years old, as it says in Pirkei Avot, he reaches the age of binah, the age of understanding. Then he starts to understand. Mm-hmm. Once you're 40, you understand. If you're just a beginner, you're getting your feet wet, what do you understand yet? You still have lacking in your knowledge. You have gaps in your knowledge. Kenayim, torn up here and there. You don't know. You don't have yet a formulated system. You don't have a coherent understanding of things. So a person who's just a Baal Tshuva, for 5 or 10 years, he thinks things like he's a big shot rabbi. Who are you to say you're a big shot rabbi? You're still a beginner. For 40 years they were in the desert, and then they start to understand the Torah. You know what I mean? So yeah, exactly. So we see from here, right, that it has to be at least 40 years old. But besides that, says the Ramah also another thing, the Shulchan Aruch. He mentions over there that the main idea of what does that mean to be a rabbi today? Like you get ordained as a rabbi, you get smicha. So he says the main idea is what? You have to understand how to use the texts of the Torah to formulate the halacha properly, to think properly, to come up with proper conclusions in halacha. A person who's not trained to do that is not yet a posek. He's not able somebody who can formulate the halacha. So therefore, he has to wait, until he gets on a higher level. He has to learn for many, many years until he gets to that level. At least we said, right, he should be 40 years old at least. But also he should be learning for many, many years. Once he gets to that level, then his rabbi, who's also a big, rabbi himself, he will give him permission to formulate the halacha. This is the way it works, So this is a very long process. It's not a short process. It takes 40 years, as we said, right? But besides that, there's also another thing I want to show you, which is also very powerful. It says in the Chumash, in Parshat Nitzavim, לא בשמיים היא לאמור לא מי עלינו בשמיים ויקחיה וישמעו אותה ונעשנה ולא בעבר הים היא לאמור מי יעבור לנו אל עבר הים. So what does that mean? According to the simple meaning of this pasuk, Moshe Rabbeinu was admonishing the Jewish people, right? He's telling them, listen, the Torah is not so far away from you, It's not so hard to keep it. You shouldn't think it's so hard. People think, oh, I can't keep it, it's too hard, it's too heavy on me. So it says, it's not in the heavens, don't worry, you don't have to go to heaven. It's not over beyond the seas. You have to go beyond the seas you can keep the Torah where you are. Don't worry. It's not so hard to keep it as you think. But there's also a deeper meaning over here, right? The drasha is like this, right? Rashi brings this down in the name of the Chazal. He says it's not found in the Torah with people who travel around, like beyond, go to plane fare. They have frequent flyer programs. They take a lot of flights, or they go to a lot of cruises. They go all over the world. Jet setting. Jet setters. The Torah is not found with people like that. They travel around too much. Why is that? What's the reason why? Because you have to be sitting and learning all the time. If you're not sitting and learning all day, and you're too busy traveling here, traveling there, you're not going to acquire the Torah like that. So it tells you right over here, the Chumash, when the Chazal explain like that. That's what it means, right? If you travel around, so there are some rabbis, unfortunately. There's one over here in America. There's also one, in Israel. They all the time they're raising money, going here, traveling from town to town, traveling salesmen, going here, going there, and then they wonder why they don't know Torah so well. All the time you're going and raising money, going from town to town, even if you're giving lectures, by the way, traveling from here to there all the time. All the time you're on the road. You cannot acquire the Torah like that. You have to be sitting, in one place and learning to acquire the Torah. Once in a while you can go, here, there, whatever. But not all the time you should be traveling. A person who's traveling all the time cannot acquire the Torah like that. This is what the Chumash is coming to tell you over here. And so therefore, what does that mean? That there are some rabbis, unfortunately, they think they can have it both ways, Travel around, be a jet setter, go on vacations all the time, or go raise money all the time, here, there, constantly going and raising money, day and night. All they do is raise money and, give some lectures here and there, going from state to state, from you're not going to become a gadol in Torah like that. You're not going to become great in Torah like that. If you're traveling around, this is exactly what it says. Lo ve'er layam, lo lever alayami. It's not beyond the seas somewhere if you're going traveling around. So there are conditions also how a person acquires the Torah like that to become somebody who can formulate the Halacha. He has to avoid these pitfalls as well. There's also another Chumash, in the Bamidbar, in the Numbers, Book of Numbers. It says over there in the 11th parak, Be'alotcha, in Parshat Be'alotcha, it says that what happened was that at that time there was a story over there. There was two guys, Eldad and Medad, two Jews who started to prophesy in the camp. They started to get prophecy. So what happened was that their prophecy was something very cruel. What they said was that Moshe Rabbeinu was going to die and he's not going to take the people into Eretz Israel. It was true, by the way. He wasn't going to take them in. It was already decreed at that time he's not going to take them in, obviously. That's how they knew. So what does that mean? That now, comes Yoshua, who was a disciple of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he hears them, Then they're prophesying, yeah, Moshe is going to die, He's not going to take them into Eretz Israel. So Yoshua gets ticked off, He says, what's going on over here? These people are cursing my rabbi. He's going to die. What kind of thing is this? So he gets really incensed about this, So he comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he complains about it. He says, there's two people over there in the camp. They're prophesying that you're going to die. What kind of thing is this? So what does he tell? What's the language over here? It says, Vayan Yoshua bin Nun meshat Moshe v'bechurav v'yomar Adonai Moshe kelaem. So it says, according to the simple meaning, he's telling Moshe Rabbeinu, go and take care of them, punish them, or put them in jail, or to kill them, to assassinate them, whatever, punish them, give them death penalty. But the Rashi brings over here from the Gemara, Masechet Sanhedrin, Yud Zayin, it says over there something else. What was Yeshua ben Nun telling them? What he was telling Moshe Rabbeinu? He was telling him, Adoni Moshe, my master Moshe, Kilaem. What does that mean? Give them some communal service to do, and that'll kill them. So what does that mean, That if a person gets communal service, he has to serve the community, to have a job, as a president or vice president or some kind of, board member, all kinds of things like this, Congressman, whatever it is, this kind of political position or social position. So he says, give him one of those positions, make him a congressman, and that's going to kill them. What does that mean? That he meant to say that they won't have prophecy anymore. Why? Because the Chazal learned from here that when a person gets social position like that, he loses his spiritual level. It goes down because when he has to be involved in the earthly matters, that takes him away from the heavenly matters. He doesn't have time to study anymore so much. He's too busy with his obligations, social obligations, position. He's got a position to take care of. He's got to go to functions. He's got to go to these parties. He's got to go to these meetings, all kinds of things, that keeps him away from studying the Torah. So a person who Yoshua ben Nun was telling Moshe Rabbeinu, give him a job like that, some kind of social position, and that'll kill them. So what do you see from there? That a person who has there are rabbis also who like to have these kinds of things, they're on this board and that board, medical boards and this kind of board, political boards, and they go to meet politicians, and they go to meet all these kinds of people. Here, the president, vice president, I have all kinds of. They're very politically connected. They're very,
Vanity.
savoir faire, kind of. Yeah, right, exactly, right. Socially, very, very connected. All the time they have meetings going on. I have a meeting with this right now, this guy, and then this guy, this donor. Donors meeting some donors. All the time you're concerned about social. But the truth is that having social responsibility is a good thing. But if you want to be a gadol in Torah, if you want to be a big chacham, you have to refuse that. You have to prevent that, right? You have to stay away from that. You have to shun positions because positions will reduce your Torah, right? And that's exactly what it says in Zohar Kadosh as well, right? It says in Zohar Kadosh, if a person wants to be really great in Torah, if he wants to be a gadol in Torah, don't be one of those social rabbis, Mr. Connected, going to meet these people, going to meet that people, Yeah, he's on the board, he's on that board, he's on this board, Yeah, he's Mr. Connected. You're going to be a gadol in Torah like that? You're going to be a posek like that? With all your obligations, communal obligations? It's going to kill you. It's going to kill your spirituality. This is exactly the reason, by the way, you should know that the Chazon Ish, who was alive in our generation, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, and also we have the Gaon of Vilna, who was 300 years ago. They both, were great rabbis. They were offered, like communal positions. Be chief rabbi. They refused every position that they were offered. And now you know why. Because once a person takes positions like that, be the chief rabbi, be chief this, chief that, that's going to all take away from your Torah, because they're going to bother you all the time, with all kinds of silly things. Oh yeah, come to this dinner now, they're having a fundraiser, they're having a dinner, so come eat some chicken with us, What chicken? I'm studying Torah. What chicken do you want now? I have to eat chicken with you? I got things to do. I got to serve God. So it's one or the other, you see. When a person takes a communal position, he loses his spiritual level. He loses his Torah. That's what it says in Zohar Kadosh as well. So this is exactly the concept that we find over here. So if a person really wants to become great in Torah, and he wants to get to the level of formulating the Halacha, he has to avoid these things. Not become like a socially connected rabbi, or a jet set rabbi, or a Lexus rabbi, somebody who's always, in the lap of luxury, living good life, going to vacations all the time. This is how you're going to become a big rabbi? With this kind of conditions? By the way, I'll tell you what a real rabbi is. That they still have the house, MARAN Bet Yosef, the one who wrote the Shulchan Aruch and Bet Yosef, one of the great rabbis, 500 years ago. Right? He wrote the rules of the Jewish people. Shulchan Aruch. His house is still there. Where he lived in Tzfat. You go in there, it's like one little shack, one little room, with a desk and a bed. He had like one room. That's how he lived. Very meager, very, very modest. That's the way it is. That's the way it's supposed to be. A person is not supposed to live in a lap of luxury, mansions, this kind of thing. What do you need a mansion for? That's going to give you Torah because you're living in a mansion? Right? Then people are going to ask you all the time, oh, let's make a party in your mansion, Let's make a party. My birthday party, this party, that party. You have time for parties when you're a chacham? There's no time for that, right? That's the idea. So a person has to know, right, that these things prevent one from becoming great in Torah, these kinds of things, this kind of lifestyle. So a person, as we said, right, that there are very important things over here we have to understand. One is that a person has to try to be lenient. Very important point, right, in Halacha. As we said, that this is something which is backed up in the words of the sages. You have to work for the people. You have to serve them. What does that mean? If they have a problem, you have to bring them a solution. Don't just tell them everything is asur. No, I can't do that. Can't do that. Can't do that. Can't do that. Everything is asur. Everything is forbidden. That's not the way it works. So a rabbi has to understand, right, how to overcome these hurdles. Right? There's also another thing, by the way, which we need to discuss in order to round out this discussion, right, to make it comprehensive more. There's also another thing which is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, and it's also brought down in the words of the sages as well, Pirkei Avot, that there are several types of rabbis. Like some rabbis, as we said, right, they all got to the level where they can formulate the halacha, paskin halacha. Some rabbis cannot do that. They're not on that level. They're just more like pulpit rabbis. Giving lectures, darasheve. like Pinchas and people like this, right? Avraham, people like this, right? That's the way they are. They're darshanim. They extrapolate. They give lectures. But the truth is, right, that the ones who did get to Paskin Halacha, the ones who did get to that level. So the truth is, right, that a person is not allowed to. He's not allowed to refuse. If somebody asks him to formulate the halacha for him, if you got to that level, you have to answer that person. You cannot just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm scared, to tell you, I'm not sure." So find out, research it. If you got to the level to formulate the halacha, you must, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu, right? God gave you, graced you with an opinion, something, a new idea, something, fresh idea, a chidush in halacha, something new. You must reveal that halacha. You must reveal it. If somebody asks you a question, you have to answer them the truth. You can't be scared and say, "Oh, what are those people going to say? What's that rabbi going to say? That rabbi who collects money all the time. What is he going to say? Or what's this rabbi going to say? The one who travels around all the time. Who cares what they say? They're not poskim. They're not people who know how to paskin halacha, to formulate the halacha. We don't care what they say. The only thing you have to care about is God. That say the truth of God. That's the only thing you have to care about. So what does that mean? It says the Shulchan Aruch that if you don't tell people the halacha, even though you know how to do it, right? It's considered to be like you're destroying the community. You're a killer. Can you imagine? That's how bad it is. So once you got that level, you must do it. It's your job now. You have to get into it. Then don't say, "Oh, I don't. Let somebody else do it. I'm scared. Why are you scared? If this is your profession, why are you scared to do it? So it says also, right, the Gal Mivina, he writes also about this. He says that a rabbi, who gets a new idea in halacha, something new, and he knows how to permit something, he knows how to do something in halacha, to make leniency, he cannot hide that. He's not allowed to hide that. He has to reveal it to the public. This is also brought down, this is Vina Gaon, in the introduction of Yebi Omer, which is the great book of MARAN Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. In the first first volume of Yebi Omer, in the introduction, he writes over there that a person who gets halacha, he's not allowed, he gets something new idea in halacha, a rabbi, he's not allowed to hide that, he has to expose it. Even though people will criticize him. Even though people will say, "Oh, you're a crazy rabbi, making some crazy ideas." If you know that it's right as a rabbi, you know that it's correct, you have to publicize that halacha. You're not allowed to hide it. And if you hide it, you're a sinner, because you're afraid of what people are going to say about you. You cannot do that. That's one side of the story, right? There's also the other side of the story. This is brought down both in Shulchan Aruch, these halachot. One next to the other, right? This is Siman Reish Ben Bet. One is Yud Gimel, one is Yud Dalet. So Yud Gimel, it says like this, right? Also, there's another problem on the other extreme, right? The other extreme is that you're a rabbi who didn't get to formulating the halacha. You're not on that level. But you do it anyway, because you guess, "Oh yeah, I think, it's like that." "Oh, you think so, huh? Do you have any sources? Do you have any way to prove it? Do you know what you're talking about?" "I think so." "You think so?" "Oh, very good." That's fantastic, So regarding this, says the Shulchan Aruch, which brought down from the Gemara as well, right? If a person does this, he formulates the halacha even though he's not on a level. So it says three things about a person like that. He's wicked, Rasha, Rasha, and he's a fool, idiotia. He's an idiot. And number three is gasruach, right? He's an arrogant person, because you're making the halacha into some kind of personal, viewpoint. I think. Who cares what you think? Go and find out what it says in the Torah. This is your job as a rabbi. Go find. If you don't know how to find out, shut your mouth. Be quiet. Why are you talking about things you don't understand? So regarding this, says the Shulchan Aruch, that a person who does this, a rabbi, or anybody else, could be he's not a rabbi. It's even worse. Right? He doesn't know nothing, this guy, right? Amaretz, not a periodicist, And he comes and says, "Oh, this is the halacha. Yeah, this rabbi is wrong." Who are you to argue with this rabbi? How do you know that he's wrong? What, you learn Torah, you learn how to formulate the halacha, you know how to paskin halacha? Who taught you these things? So it says the Shulchan Aruch about a person like that, comes from the Gemara as well. Rabim Chalalim Hipila. It's a pasuk in Mishlei, the 7th parak of Mishlei. It says over there, right, that he has killed many people. What does that mean? That a person who does this, who formulates the halacha, even though he doesn't know how to do it, and he just guesses, puts some things out of his mouth, he's considered to be, what? He's considered to be, right, a big rasha, a killer, a killer. Come sit down, please. Join us. The ladies' table over there. Here. Right there, yeah. Okay. So he's considered to be a person who's a killer. So how does it make you into a killer if you say the wrong halacha? What do you think? How does that work? You're a killer because you said you're a murderer? What do you say? She's got a mask on. She can't say anything.
Because she could cause someone to commit a sin that could potentially.
Yeah, you could cause somebody to die because you caused them to sin. I mean, that's the simple meaning of the.
How did she know that?
Huh? I told you she's smart. She's smart. I told you.
Oh.
Okay, so she's a smart one. Yeah. So, but the Zohar Kadosh says something even deeper about that. Something even more profound. Comes Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, right, the greatest Kabbalist that we ever had, right, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and tells his students in the Zohar Kadosh, he tells them, he says, be careful, don't ever say anything in Torah that you didn't get from your rabbis. Don't just make up things from your own mind. This is a very dangerous procedure, what you're doing, if you do that.
You mean like they do around here?
Embellish, embellishing things, Oh yeah, I think it's like this. You think so, huh? Where'd you get that from? Can you bring me the source for that? Right? Do you have any foundation for your what you're saying? So comes Rabbi Shimon and tells them, if you do that, you should know. If you make up stories about halacha, things that you never, or anything else in Torah, any other ideas in Torah, you just make up things as you go. You should know that you are killing people. Says Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Exactly what it says right in the Shulchan Aruch, that he's a killer. You understand? You are a murderer. But over there, the Zohar Kadosh is not talking about the murder that we just said, that Shoshana said. It's not talking about that. What does that mean? You caused him to sin, and because of that he died. That could be possible. Zohar Kadosh is saying, no, Rabbi Shimon was not talking about that. You know what he was saying? What he was saying is that people actually die. Like there's natural disasters, like hurricanes, we have tornadoes, we have all kinds of things, right? We have volcanoes. Right? We have, God, right? We have looters, we have riots, right? We have, all kinds of things going on. People are dying all the time. So what does that mean? That Rabbi Shimon is telling them, those natural disasters that people are dying, you're causing that by telling them the wrong halacha. This is how far it goes. So you're actually really a destroyer. There's an album like that, Destroyer. She knows that, right? Miriam knows that. Okay, so you're a destroyer.
You gave me that album. Remember, I took it home.
His memory is much better than mine. Okay, tell you.
I listened. You asked me if I listened to it, and I'm like, yeah, man, it destroyed me. I think I gave you a.
Yeah.
We traded albums, I think.
Right. Yes, we did. We swapped.
I gave you "Hot Space" by Queen.
Okay.
And you gave me that.
Your memory is much better than mine.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is like this, right? That you're a destroyer. When you tell people the wrong halacha, you're a destroyer. You're destroying the world like that. So the reason is why is giving people the wrong halacha considered to be such a big crime like that? Not anything else, we say that. Like let's say you give a person, some bad advice. You told them, go take the subway, don't take the bus, so you got messed up. Okay, but you're not a destroyer. I mean, okay, you gave him the wrong advice, but but when you give somebody the wrong halacha, it's destruction. You're destroying the world. You're destroying everything. You're destroying the people. You're killing people. Why such a severe thing like this? What's the reason for that? So you know what the answer is? The answer is that it says in the Zohar Kadosh and also other places in the Chazal. The Kadosh Baruch Hu, when he created the world, how did he create the world? He looked in the Torah and he created the world from the Torah. That's what it says, right? So what does that mean? That the world is just the Torah is a blueprint for the world. The world is just a function of the Torah. It's just like one little corner of the Torah. That's what it is. It's kind of like abstract concept, but that's the way it really is. So what does that mean? That since the world functions on the basis of the foundation of the Torah, nothing else really makes it go besides that. So when you give the people the wrong halacha, you're destroying the world because the world stands on the Torah. The world stands on the Torah. So you have to be very, very careful, not to give people the wrong halacha. If you don't know, just say, I don't know. That's what it says in Masechet Brachot. It says in Gemaran Brachot, a person should accustom himself to say, to what? Say what? When people ask him questions, say, I don't know. Don't be embarrassed to say that. Why? Because you think, they're going to think you're stupid? You're going to think you're a fool, huh? You don't know. I don't know. Making yourself look like a fool, right? But the Torah doesn't consider that to be a fool. It considers to be a wise man, the person who says that. If you don't know, just say you don't know.
So you don't think Trump knows everything? When he says he knows everything, he knows more than the generals?
That's
He knows
something else.
everything. I mean,
Accustom yourself to say, I don't know. There's a story like this brought down in the Midrash. Something amazing. Like sometimes people ask you questions, and you're just like, you want to just give them some answer so you can think, they should think like you have a brain, like otherwise they think your brain is like your mind is empty, like you're totally, you're dud, you're a big dud inside. So they have to give some kind of answer, to make them like, feel like, oh yeah, I know something, I'm not that stupid, right? But the truth is, this is not the proper way to behave. If you don't know, if you're not sure about something, just say, I don't know. So, who was the biggest rabbi in the Talmud? One of the big rabbis. We had several of them, right? Rabbi Eliezer, we had Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer was the rabbi of Rabbi Akiva. That's what it was, right? Rabbi Eliezer Gadol. These were the two big, big rabbis in the Talmud. Big people. Nobody can mess with these people. You know what I mean? These are like, So one time it says in the Midrash that Rabbi Akiva came to a certain town. And they see the big rabbi like this, coming in, so they got their notebooks ready, questions, already, okay, Rabbi, what do you say about this? What's the rule about that? Right? They got everything ready, right? So Rabbi Akiva comes in, big rabbi, big beard, big hat, this like this, big tall hat, cylinder, comes in, right, and ask him a question, So they ask him 3 questions that day, over there, the crowd over there. This was like a town, that he never went to. So, right, his luck, right? He didn't know the answer to any of these questions. Can you imagine a big rabbi like this, He didn't know the answer to the questions. All the 3 questions he didn't know. Such a thing like this, So a person has to, by the way, learn from here, a moral lesson. The moral lesson is, if Rabbi Akiva didn't know 3 questions, what about you, It's no big deal if you don't know. Rabbi Akiva didn't know. You were not any better than him. Who's better than him? Nobody. But the point was like this, right? When they asked him these questions, he didn't try to like make up some stories, embellish, some kind of stories, Yeah, I think. He just told them, I don't know. And he felt terrible. He felt he was ashamed. Because you come like a big rabbi like that, and all the questions they ask you, you don't know one of them. But nevertheless, he just said, I don't know. This is the way it has to be, So a person has to accustom himself to get into this kind of behavior. If you don't know, just say you don't know. If you know something, okay, tell them what you know. Tell them, listen, I saw in this book like this, this book says like this. Okay, tell them if you know something, tell them. But if you don't know, just say I don't know. This is the best way this is the way to avoid the problem. Because if a person starts getting into this embellishment, improvising, he's improvising, he's improvising. What are you improvising for? Torah is not a guitar riff, you improvise. Torah is not like that. You have to either you know or you don't know, one or the other.
what were the questions?
I don't recall. Offhand right now. They were tough questions. Not like easy questions. ABC stuff. Like is an egg parv? Not things like this. You know what I mean? These were tough questions. You have to be big with shoulders to. By the way, there's also another story like this, which is also similar to that. You know what it is? They say that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right, who was a couple of generations after Rabbi Akiva, he sent one of his disciples, to go to a certain town, because they had no rabbi there, so to answer their questions, to guide them the proper way, right? So he goes over there, right, and so as the town gathers, to see this big rabbi. So, right, again, they want to ask him questions. That's what they came there for. Not making parties, making the celebrations. That's not what they came there for. So what happened was before they asked him any questions, what they told him? They said, oh, are you that great rabbi we heard about? The great Talmud of Rabbi Ovadia? You're the one? You're that guy? You know? So he answered them, yeah, that's me, yeah. You know, in the flesh, right? So then they start to ask him questions, you know? And again, not one of them he knew the answer. Every question they asked him, he didn't know the answer. Again, same thing, right? So he comes back, you know, like really, you know, like with his head down, you know, down low, you know, it's like really feels degraded. He comes back to Rabbi Ovadia, you know? So Rabbi Ovadia tells him, what happened, you know? Did you solve their problems over there in that town? You gave them the answers that they needed? So he says, Rabbi, I have to tell you the truth. He says, you know, I didn't know every question they asked me, I didn't know the answer. So he asks them, just like you, right? He says, what questions did they ask you? You know, so he enumerates the questions to them. You know, what questions he asked. So Rabbi Ovadia, you know, he was shocked when he heard these questions. Why was he shocked? Because he said, I taught you the answers to all these questions. You know, so how is it that you didn't know the answer? I taught you the answer to the questions. Every one of these questions you should know. So you know what he answered? This disciple? What does he answer? A very, very strong, powerful, right? Shotgun answer. He tells him, he says, Rabbi, he says, you're right. We learned all these things. I remember very well. We learned everything. But he says, you know what happened to me? He says, when they told me, when I first came over there, right? Oh, you're that big rabbi, you know, you're that big scholar. He said, I became arrogant in my heart, you know, I became haughty, right? So because of that, he says, I forgot all the answers to everything. So what do you see from there, right? That where does the wisdom dwell? It dwells amongst the humble people. People have humility, right? If you have humility, the wisdom stays with you. If you become arrogant, the wisdom escapes you. Because, you know why? Kadosh Baruch Hu cannot stand the arrogant people. The people who are haughty. They think highly of themselves, you know? Oh, yeah, I'm a big shot, you know? Why do you think you're a big shot? Why? You can't stand people like that. So the wisdom escapes them. It runs away from them. The only person that really has wisdom is the one who's humble. So we already mentioned, right, before you guys came, we mentioned that Halacha is like Bet Hillel. And they're the lenient opinion. It always has to be Halacha like the lenient opinion. This is by the way, the Chida, MARAN Chida, something amazing he says. Don't answer the phone, don't worry. Something amazing he says. It says the Chida, that just like Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, there were two schools of thought, right? Bet Shammai was the stringent, and Bet Hillel was lenient. That's the way it was, right? Halacha has to be like the lenient side, as we already said, right? According to Zohar Kadosh, according to the Talmud also. So comes right comes the as we said, right? Bet Hillel. So comes the Chida. Comes the Chida and says that this dichotomy in Jewish people, where one side is stringent and one side is lenient, it's not only in the times of the Talmud. It also exists in our times as well. It never leaves the Jewish people, this dichotomy. This is just one example of one generation that was like that. But there's always a lenient side, there's always a stringent side. Every generation has these two things. So comes the Chida and says, when you continue, right, the tradition in the Jewish people, right, as the generations go along, who in our generation, who's Bet Hillel, who's Bet Shammai? This is the question, right? MARAN Chida. Who was MARAN Chida? Rabbi Yosef David Azulai, right? One of the big Chachamim of 300 years ago. Big Achronim, big Poskim, big Kubal also he was. The Chida. So he says that in our generation, who's the Bet Hillel? Sephardim. Who's Bet Shammai? Ashkenazim. That's what he says. Ashkenazim are more stringent than the Sephardim. That's the way it is. You need both sides. Because the world exists on judgment and exists on kindness. Both sides you need. So says the Chida, this is the way it is until this day. So if you go, by the way, you know, MARAN, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, my rabbi used to tell us, he would know, right, but more than anybody else. He said, I looked in the whole Shulchan Aruch, like the whole Jewish book of law, Shulchan Aruch. He says 80% of the time, the Ashkenazim are more stringent than the Sephardim. And the Sephardim are more lenient. That's the way it is. Right? So you see from there also, same thing, right? It never leaves us, this is the whole thing. Also in the generation of the Rambam as well, right? The Rambam was also quite lenient. Also, MARAN Bet Yosef, the time Shulchan Aruch, lenient. Again, right, the same. And MARAN Rabbi Ovadia, same thing, my rabbi. More lenient than everybody else. So this is the way it is. The Sephardim are more lenient. Why is that? Because it says in MARAN Achidam, the Sephardim have the side of chesed, the kindness, And Ashkenazim are more stringent, they're more din, they're more judgment. It doesn't mean, by the way, take it the wrong way. It doesn't mean Ashkenazim don't have kindness and Sephardim don't have judgment. It's not true. That's not what it means. What it means is it's more of a tendency to go to that side. That's what it means. It doesn't mean it's absolute. No such a thing as absolute. There's nothing absolute in this world. That's the way it is. So, it says MARAN Achida, until this day we have this division, right? So, what I want to tell you, right, to sum up this lecture, right, we have to understand one thing. That the tradition that I got from my rabbi was exactly this. He told us, you must be as lenient as possible according to the borders of the Halacha. Don't give people stringencies in this generation. Why? Why is that? Because this generation is weak. They cannot stand stringencies. It makes them buckle, buckle down. It makes them collapse. They can't tolerate stringencies in this generation. It's a weak generation. It's not like the generation we had like 200 years ago or 300 years ago. It's not the same level. In those generations, they were much stronger. They will tolerate a lot more. In this generation, go as lenient as possible. So what I want to tell you is like this, right? To answer my friends, right, who've been talking about this issue that we talked about, that if you don't go in this way, as a rabbi, to try to be as lenient as possible, you are not going in the ways of MARAN Ovadia, for sure. You are not a Talmud of Rabbi Ovadia. You're not his disciple. Because this was his way. This was something they taught us, always stressed it, and very much told us, right? This is the way. He told us, if you don't go this way, you're not my disciple. That's what he told us. You don't go in my ways. So a person has to understand that. So, if you jump over there to this rabbi and that rabbi, he'll give you all kinds of, stringencies. He'll tell you, everything is forbidden, don't do anything. This is not the way of the Halacha. As we said, that in every generation, it says in Rakadosh, the leniency has to be on top of the stringency. Always on top. Has to take precedence over the stringency. Why is that? So the final bottom line is like this, right? That Kadosh Baruch Hu prefers, even though the world was created with judgment and with chesed, with kindness, but Kadosh Baruch Hu prefers the kindness over the judgment. Why is that? Because if there's no kindness in this world, the world cannot exist without that. The judgment would be too severe. We'd have to be killed. We'd have to be destroyed. The whole world is destroyed. So we can't tolerate that. So what is the kindness? What does it consist of? That the world has kindness. So it says the Ramchal, one of the big Mekubalim, in his work Derech Hashem, over there he talks about this. Maybe you remember what I'm going to tell you right now. It says over there like this. Kindness consists of this. That kindness means that Kadosh Baruch Hu will judge everybody anyway. Everybody will be judged for every sin that they do and every good thing that they do, every good deed they do. Nothing will be left unjudged. The good deeds will be rewarded, the sins will be punished. Nothing is left uncovered. Nothing. Zero. But so then where does the kindness come in then? If that's the case, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu judges everything. So where does the kindness come in? So it says the Ramchal, a very good explanation. He says that the kindness comes in like this. You're going to be judged, but they're going to give you a payment plan, like installments, a 3-year installment plan. Because if you get the punishment in one shot, that means like, poof, gone. God forbid. If you get it in one shot. But if they give you installments, you go easy, like in conversion. You get installments, right? Sometimes, right? So that's the idea. We get installments. Punishment comes little by little, a little bit this year, a little bit next year. As the Chazal say, that the Chet HaEgel, right, the sin of the golden calf was so great that Kadosh Baruch Hu has to punish him every generation. It can never be atoned for, the sin, until he punishes him in every generation until Mashiach comes. The sin was so great. Got installments. If it wasn't for that, the whole people would be destroyed, God forbid. So this is the part of the chesed, the kindness. One thing is you get installments, the punishments come little by little, And what's the other element of the kindness? It says Ramchal, he says the other element is like this, that the punishment gets delayed. What does that mean? That a person will start to sin, let's say, a certain sin, he does, So he got used to it, right? It became like a habit already. Very hard for him to get rid of it. Habitual. Got habituated. And what happens is that now He thinks like, the Chazal say, by the way, in the Gemara, that when a person does a sin several times, he thinks already like it's allowed, because his conscience, he starts to lose his conscience already. He thinks it's allowed. Yeah, if I did it so many times, it must be allowed. Because, how am I doing it so many times? So Kadosh Baruch Hu does like this, right? When he sees a person like that becomes a sinner, habitual sinner, he doesn't punish him right away. Because right away, if he punishes him right away, he should die now. God forbid. So what does he do? He waits, Erech HaPaim. That's the concept, Erech HaPaim. What does that mean? He's slow in anger, right? He doesn't anger right away. Doesn't punish right away. So he waits, What is he waiting for, by the way? What is he waiting for? For a blue moon? What is he waiting for? How long is he going to wait? You know what he's waiting for? So he's waiting for the person to do teshuvah, Now Rosh Hashanah is coming, right? He's going to do teshuvah, when they blow the shofar, he's going to have some tears in his eyes. I sinned. I sinned. Right? You remember that, right? I sinned. He's going to come and say, he's going to do teshuvah. So Kadosh Baruch Hu waits for him, Okay, you know what? Maybe this year you'll do teshuvah. If not this year, maybe next year. And I'll wait for you. I won't punish you right away. This is also kindness, this element. I'll wait for you 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, whatever it is, until you get to the next end of your life. I'll wait for you. Once you do teshuvah, then I'll give you installments also. This is like two-pronged kindness over here. One is that he waits. You shouldn't do that according to strict judgment. He shouldn't wait. You should punish him right away. You do the sin now, you get punished now. But he waits. 15 years, 20 years, whatever it is, he waits. So, yeah.
Is God Ashkenazi or Sephardi?
We were just learning today, with my friend, my friend Shoshana, we were learning today in the Rambam, right? Exactly about this point, right? That about God, like what is God about? So the Rambam says, in the beginning of his work, Mishneh Torah, he says that God is only one truth. By him, the truth is very simple. It's very plain, So there's no dichotomy with God, This side, that side. God is one. Yeah. Not only in his essence he's one, but also in his thoughts, and his truth is one. This is what we learned. Yeah. So this is exactly the answer to the question. There's no Ashkenazi and Sephardi with God. Kidding, but there's an answer to that, right? The answer is that with God everything is plain and simple. It's oneness. The truth, very simple truth. There's no dichotomy with God. Only with creations there's dichotomy. This side, that side. With him, everything is one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. God is only one. And this is the essence of the Jewish religion, right? That we believe in one God, and one God with one thoughts and one religion, one philosophy, one truth. Everything is one. That's the idea. This is the essence of the Jewish people. So Kadosh Baruch Hu should give you a new year, a good new year, prosperous, healthy, wealthy, and good, everything good, right? Ruchaniyut and Gashmiyut, spiritual and material as well, wealth, health, happiness, good marriage, good married life, B'ezrat Hashem, all the good things, and most of all, right, we should have the health and the strength to study Torah and serve God the way He wants. Amen, amen. Chazak u'baruch. Shana tova. All the best.
Thank you.
Okay.